Okay, I'm going to begin. So, hi everyone, welcome back to our new podcast, Life in Motion. Just as a reminder, we are interns at the University of Illinois, hoping to help early career professionals navigate the workspace with confidence. So, my name is Nora.
And I'm Amy, and we're glad that you're tuning in today's conversation because we have a special guest joining us that we'd really like to welcome, Cynthia Iorio, my bad. Welcome to Life in Motion, and would you like to share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So I have been working full time in my career for, I want to say 20 years officially. I entered the workforce when I was 24 after having done a university degree in marketing with a minor in sociology. And trying to decide who and what I wanted to be was really difficult for me. So when I was younger and like much younger, wanted to be a Broadway actress and I wanted to be on stage. And my parents were like, you got to go do something so that you're not eating macaroni and cheese your whole life. And so I got a degree in business. And when it was time for me to decide what I wanted to do, after graduating, I went to go work for a company here, which is in electronic component distribution. So basically, all the little microchips that go into anything electronic. And I really started on the bottom in a marketing career and worked my way up over the course of the next 5 years. Um, I was transferred to London, England, and worked in London for a little bit and tasted that. And after about 5 years working, I kind of had this like existential question in the back of my mind. Do I want to be making the man rich? Like, do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life? I was successful. I had gone to school and done all of that. And ultimately, I ended up deciding that I wanted to pursue a passion of mine, which was journalism. And so at 28 years old, 29 years old, I left work full time. I moved back home with my mom and I went and got a graduate degree in journalism. And I got into journalism thinking that I was going to change the world. It was this thing inside of me that I wanted to tell people stories. And I did that for about 6 months. It was a year-long program. I did it for about 6 months, and I realized that the world of journalism was different than my ideal of journalism. And so I wanted to find something that would allow me to marry my skills in marketing and communication, and make money. And I ultimately found project and program management. And that's really where I settled in my career. And I worked for different IT companies. I worked in aerospace. And then I recently just left my job in Microsoft as a program manager to start my own business. But we'll get into that, I guess.
Thank you so
Wow,
much
that's
for
yeah.
sharing. I,
We've seen that you also have a podcast of your own that you've created and hosted called Love, Transform, and Evolve. And we wanted to know what got you inspired to create that.
Yeah, so the podcast is actually the first step in a major career and life change that I've made. So, when I was 34 years old, in the middle of my career, after I had, gone to school twice and figured out I wanted to be in project and program management, I hadn't been married and I didn't have any children, and I was kind of living this high life career. As a career woman, I got a call from my mom on a Monday morning asking me to take her to the hospital at the end of the week. It was a routine follow up with her oncologist. She had had stage 2 cancer a couple of years prior. And I said, sure, no problem. And ultimately, what we found out at the end of the week was that my mother's cancer had returned and it was metastatic bladder cancer. And after she pressed him for life expectancy, he told her she had 6 to 12 months to live.
wow.
And in that moment, everything changed. And you never know how you're going to react when these things happen. Up until that point, I felt very fortunate. I had planned my life a certain way. And even though I didn't get married and have the kids like I thought I was going to have, my career was thriving. But in that moment, I had this like fire in the pit of my stomach. And it just basically said, Cynthia, you need to move home. You need to move home. You need to be with your mom. And in a weird, crazy way, we've been given an opportunity. And that opportunity is to see your mother's life out for the rest of her days as best as possible. And so that's what happened. And I jumped in head first, and I didn't realize just how significant of a life change that was going to be. I mean, I was completely naive. In the first couple of months, I was working full time while accompanying my mother to different doctor's appointments and stuff like that. But after about 3 months, my mother had something called a pleural effusion, which is her lungs had filled with water. And I realized I had to take a full leave of absence from work. And I became her full time caregiver. And at the end of it all, she passed away 11 months later. At the end of it all, I was a changed person. I had been ripped from my life. I had lost the person who was my tether to the world. I had just gone through this monumental life changing experience. And, I didn't even know who I was anymore. And it was something that stayed with me for a really, really long time. And I know this is a long way to get to the answer of where does the podcast come from, but ultimately, um, it was the kind of experience that I felt really isolated by, and I felt really alone with, and I felt that I wasn't actually represented in any kind of conversation about what it meant to be a caregiver. And I carried that with me for a long time until 2022. So my mom got sick in 2015. 2022, my dad got sick with with a terminal illness of his own,
Wow,
an
yeah.
illness called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's an offshoot of mad cow, which was wild. But anyways, at that time, I was 41. I was a single mom at this point, and I was thrust into the role of being a caregiver again. Uh, and again, yes, there had been advancements in kind of the world of caregiving, but there wasn't a lot out there. And I embraced my role as caregiver this time because I've done a lot of therapy and I've done a lot of stuff to really wrap my head around what had gone on with my mom. And the year after my dad passed, he passed within a month, I realized I wanted to help people. And I needed to talk about caregiving in a different way than I had seen talked about in the past. The role itself was such an empowering one. And so I put together this concept of what I call my Reflections Caregiver Initiative. And this initiative was rooted in education, storytelling, and coaching, these three pillars. And the storytelling is where we learn about who we are and how we are and all of that. And that's where I started because that's the fun stuff for me. That's the media journalism background. And so I started the podcast and I hired a producer to work with me to help me bring my vision to life. And so the first season was called Lead with Love because that's kind of what the story was. And it's every episode is 20 minutes and it's kind of like a different theme of what we as caregivers go through. And it just took on a life of its own and people loved it and wanted more. And so I changed the name to Love, Transform, Evolve to focus on how this role of caregiving, yes, it comes from love, but also how it can transform us. And I'm about to launch season 3, which is how we evolve as humans as a result of this.
Thank you so much for sharing like your whole story. I think it's truly inspiring and also just how you took like kind of like the fire from like your own experience and just wanted to like really go through with it and like try to help other people and put the word out there on how to, just like give different like tips and like share your experience and put it on like a public eye sort of thing. I think that's just like truly inspiring and that's yeah, definitely amazing. And I wish you the best of luck on your podcast journey. I can't wait to
Thank
like tune
you.
in and listen to episodes.
Me too.
Um,
Yeah. Well, so every season is super digestible, just to say, and it's not just about tactical caregiving,
mhm,
right? Like it's really about how like we are changed as human beings as a result of caring for somebody else
right.
and as a result of working with a system that unfortunately is not designed to support as many people as are getting sick and aging and all of that.
Mhm.
And like it's happening to us too. It's not just happening to the person who's sick, right? So it's
Yeah.
about, all of that.
No, and I just want to share a little bit about like I guess my caregiving experience, but it was more so like It was like my mom's mom, so my grandmother, and she was diagnosed with dementia. And we kind of started
Mm.
seeing signs of her dementia when she was working at her own business and running it all on her own. So we started seeing like little signs of her like memory loss. So then we took her into like our home. And her biggest fear was to be put into like a memory care facility. So we reassured her that like that would never happen to her, like as it was her biggest fear. So like I definitely saw a lot of like her life kind of transforming, especially towards the end. It was a little bit difficult because then I went to college. It was my freshman year here at University of Illinois. So the first couple months that I was here, I was like having to go back home constantly, missed a lot of school. And then eventually when she passed away, I like had to miss even more school then for like her funeral and stuff like that. But I definitely saw like, although my mom, she's a stay-at-home mom, um, she still has a life of her own. She still has a lot of like like she does so much for like my family and like all the taxes, all the behind the scenes work. So I definitely saw like how much she had to put her life on hold when she was caring for my grandmother. And I just feel like it's something that like especially even like your podcast, I wish this is something that I would have maybe like gave her to listen to because I feel like it just would have been so helpful for her to just, hear from other people's experiences and gain any insight on what they're going through. I feel like a lot of caregiving stories are really like similar, where a lot of people are having to put their lives on hold. And like how you said, like you had to move back and just really care for your mom and then eventually your dad too, which I really respect. And I think that's amazing that you, yeah, made that decision to do so. So yeah, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I would assume your mom would say the same thing too. Like the caring for a loved one, it's like it's natural.
Mhm.
It really is in our human nature to want to be there for other people. I think it's the systems that we interact with on a regular basis. It's the pace of life that gets in the way of us being able to do that, right? But this is the cost of civilization. Civilization is what we have to work with, and a lot of the times, especially like I can think back to when I was, just starting out in my career and the way I thought about people who were getting older. I think about not even just like the elderly, but like my mom and parents at the time. I would think that they had all the answers, but they didn't have all the answers. And your mom didn't have all the answers. And
Mhm.
like life is being thrown at us. It's the first time we're going through life too, And so we're navigating these situations and we don't have a lot of experience. Like it's the first time your mom had a mom who got sick.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not like she had this thing innate inside of her. So she was learning as well. And when you're in the thick of it, I know for me, I was just being a good daughter. I didn't think of myself as a caregiver.
Right.
I didn't think about that title. Um, and it's only in hindsight that I realized, oh, I was doing things that are akin to what the society calls being a caregiver. And only in hindsight was I able to look backwards and see like just how powerful the role was. But we're all going through life for the first time.
Yeah, right. No, it definitely is like a huge learning curve, and no one knows the right answers, especially like I know my mom was feeling all different types of emotions and everything. It definitely is like a big, big challenge, but yeah, definitely thank you so much for sharing your experience on that.
Yeah. And I just want to say one other thing. We don't talk about it enough.
Hmm.
Like we think it's a woman issue, or we think it's an older person's issue, or we don't like everybody's a caregiver. You have somebody who breaks their leg and they need you to drive them to school or to an appointment or whatever. You're a caregiver all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like this is not, it doesn't discriminate. So we like once I started to be able to talk about it, other people were like, oh yeah, me too. I did that. Oh yeah, me too. And then it's like we're all there. So
Yeah, that's true.
I definitely resonated with what you said about there not being a lot of resources for caregivers or people that are being cared for. It's like something I've experienced too with my grandmother. And I think it's really cool that you provide that resource with your podcast.
thank you. Thank you. I hope just to give solidarity. We as human beings, one of the most important things is that we're seen. We just want to be seen and acknowledged and like, hey, I'm over here doing this thing rather than, being kind of dismissed. So,
Mhm.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, so I know that obviously when you're in a position where you're caregiving or just in normal life, there's a lot of different responsibilities that are pulling you like in different directions. So what are some strategies that you have to like stay on top of things and stay organized and even like also throughout that like take care of your mental health as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question was really simple, but I think the answer is very, it can be quite complex. Um, and the way I want to answer this question truly is by saying that it's really important to understand who you are and how you deal with things. The relationship that we have to ourselves, I have learned in going through my life, is the most important relationship that you can ever have. Understanding and accepting just who you are at your base, what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and having compassion for that is really important. Because for somebody like me, I'm an extremely organized person. I have always been. I work off of lists. I like things being structured in a certain way. I learned very early on in my career. I had a mentor. His name was Alex. He was awesome. And one of the things that he taught me, which was monumental into maintaining a successful career and even in caregiving, is that the most important activity he did at the end of every week was to sit down and write down all the things that he wanted to prioritize for the following week. That 2 hours, instead of finishing the week of like doing that, that time that he took and that I ultimately ended up taking to set an intention and an objective for the next week allowed me to decide when the next week arose what was important versus what was urgent, what could be pushed aside, because you can't plan for the life and what it's going to throw at you. All you can do is plan on what are your objectives. And the sooner you can understand what your objectives are, the sooner you can understand what you're working with, the sooner you can make decisions on what should stay, what should go, what should be done, what should not be done. Also, accepting that your to-do list will never be complete. Being okay with that. Being okay that the to-do list will continue to be pushed along. I used to be obsessed with clearing my inbox. I used to be obsessed with it. Like I would finish an email, I would put it, file it away, and my inbox would be clean. But life is going to pile up. And so being okay and learning to be okay with the chaos was also something that I had to get good with. So that's, understanding who you are, having compassion for who you are, and then having an understanding what your objectives are, I think are really critical to success in business, but also in caregiving.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, especially with communication as well, and also being able to use your communication with also setting clear objectives. I think it's something with like a lot of people struggle with, especially with people that are our age. And we wanted to know like what ways that young professionals can also improve their communication based on your experience.
So in all transparency, I haven't worked with Gen Z
Mhm.
much. I haven't interacted much with Gen Z. All I know is what I have read and the criticisms, I'll be honest with you, of what Gen Z is online. Okay. But what I will tell you is that anything you read online is somebody who's trying to sell you something, is based on their opinion or their experience. And the best way to understand someone or a situation is to ask yourself, to ask and be involved. So the best way to improve your communication is to actually genuinely take an interest in somebody else, is to actually genuinely implicate yourself and don't make assumptions. Ask questions and get curious. And listen. Communication is not about talking, it's about listening. And the more you ask questions, the more the story shapes out, the more answers or moving forward actually reveals itself. Um, so that's kind of like, being human, really being human, interacting, looking at someone in their eyes, picking up the phone and calling someone, having human connection is a key to communication. The other thing that I will say about communication is understanding the other person and what's important to them. So if I'm going to talk to an executive, I need to know how an executive thinks. An executive doesn't need to see my work. The executive doesn't need to know that I did this and I did that and I went here and I went there and then I came to this answer. The executive says, tell me what the answer is that you need or that you're seeking, or tell me where you're at. I don't need to know, because the executive already assumes you've gotten there. But if you're with your manager, your direct manager, and you're in an evaluation, for example, and someone is evaluating you, well, you're going to want to communicate your successes and be okay with communicating the level of detail of the things that you've done in order to be able to convey the value that you're bringing to your position. So understanding who your audience is and how they make decisions and what's important to them helps you tailor your communication style to who they are. It's the
Yeah.
same thing in caregiving. A doctor, what's important to the doctor? What do they need to know? So show up, be prepared, have the bullet points. So the doctor has all the information that they need to help make a decision for you or for the situation. And if you don't know what the doctor needs, ask the doctor. How can I be of better service to you so you can be of better service to the person that you're caring for? Because that's ultimately the important thing. So I don't know if that answers your question when you're looking for communication, or if you want, more tactical ideas.
No, yeah, we definitely appreciate all the tips that you gave and just breaking it down. I was also wondering, in terms of like having difficult conversations, I know some people, everyone has a different personality type. Some people are not as confrontational as others, or maybe are more shy than others. But in terms of like having difficult conversations, like asking for a raise or like giving constructive feedback, what do you like recommend in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, having difficult conversations are probably always going to be uncomfortable. That's the first thing. If anyone tells you, "Oh, I'm a pro at having difficult conversations," they're probably a narcissist, or they probably have some kind of personality disorder. Because difficult conversations are difficult conversations. So I
Right.
think the first step is acknowledging that you're about to go into a situation that's going to be difficult. The second thing about having difficult conversations is understanding that you can't control the other person and you can't control the outcome. The only thing that you can control is what you're bringing to the table. So preparing for a difficult conversation, I think, is really important as well. Role playing. And I know it seems awkward, but like sit in front of a mirror and actually say the words out loud. Because the way it sounds in your head is going to be different than the way it comes out of your mouth. And the more you practice, the more comfortable you get with doing all of that. Um, I think understanding again how are decisions made, and I'm going to focus on the example that you gave me about asking for a raise, and then I'll give you one other example of a difficult conversation, but about specifically asking for a raise. This is not personal, okay? It's business. So you have to approach this from a business perspective. And so you have to understand how are decisions made to promote somebody or to give somebody more money in the organization. And simply asking the question of your boss before you walk in there, what do people do to get raises here? Inform yourself so that you know they're giving you the formula. The answer is there. And if you go in and you give them the answers of what the formula is that they told you and they still say no, well, then that's a different conversation, because you've given an informed argument, if you would. They've not met you. And now you're in a position to have a negotiation and a conversation. And if they misinformed you, well, you got a whole lot of new information if somebody gave you the wrong information, because this now speaks to the relationship with the person that you're working with to try to help you get ahead. Can you trust this person? Is this an organization that you want to be working for? Or you might just get the raise and then it's going to be wonderful. I said, talking about difficult conversation there, the other difficult conversations are constructive criticism
Mhm.
or feedback. And again, having a conversation where you're going to give somebody some feedback, whether in business or even in like a personal relationship, because sometimes in a caregiving situation, your loved one is sucking the life out of you. Like you become that person's everything. And they're like, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do that, and you feel like you're overwhelmed and being pulled in a gajillion different directions. It's that if you're going to be in a position, if ever you're going to disappoint yourself or anyone else, always disappoint someone else. The only thing you can do is to be and have integrity towards yourself and speak from a place of, hey, this doesn't work for me. And this didn't work for me for XYZ reasons. And this is how, you know, this is the line I need to draw. This is what needs to happen. And then after that, the other person's going to have the feelings that belong to them. But constructive criticism isn't about manipulation. It isn't about being mean. It's about giving honest feedback that someone's going to have to process, but a boundary that you're protecting, that you're putting there to protect yourself. So again, it's all about you and being okay with disappointing other people.
That's definitely a great point. Do you have any final piece of advice for our listeners in Life in Motion?
Or anything that you wish you would have known from like starting your first job or like early on in your career?
Oh gosh. Uh, where do I begin?
Yeah.
Look, I think I think the most important thing is to realize that life happens for you when the things that you think you want, you don't get.
Mhm.
And that life can be really exciting. And that your brain is going to tell you that you want XYZ because your brain, it's the ego, it's trying to control things. Um, but your brain can't think of everything. And so let life take you where it needs to take you, and always be sure to check in with yourself. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay that something stops working after it worked for a long time. And and the, and find your people. That's the other thing. Is be okay with life not turning out the way you expect, but go ahead and find your people, because your network is what's going to help you get through the good times and the hard times.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences and your advice with us. So I just wanted to let everyone know to check out Cynthia's podcast, Love, Transform, Evolve. I'm sure it is such a great resource for anyone. And thank you so much for this conversation and for joining us today. And we like truly loved hearing all of your advice and hosting you on this podcast. And I know a lot of people will take a lot of interest in listening to what you have to say about like your caregiving experience and just your own personal experience, like through your career changes and where you are today with your podcast too. So, before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask, where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more about your work and connect with you?
Absolutely. So I have a website, cynthiaiorio.com. This is my new business that I've just launched. I am helping employers support their working caregiver demographic. So you can contact me there, see the work that I'm doing in that space. I'm also on Instagram at Cynthia Iorio, spelled Iorio. And yeah, just drop me an email. I'm quite responsive, and looking forward to connecting whoever is interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you. A huge thanks to Cynthia for joining us today, and thank you for everyone who is listening to this video. And if you find this video helpful, please make sure to follow Life in Motion and share this video with any friend who you find may find all this information really helpful. We're going to release our episodes on Friday at 5 p.m., so look out for that. And yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.